Okay, we're recording.
Okay, we are going to call the curriculum committee to order. Take a roll call. I know Mark is coming a little late. If Ted is here, I'm here. Or you. So do you want to approve the,
Approve the agenda.
and I'll second it. And Greg, you want to speak with us?
Sure.
And you'll carry fine from there to here, Greg.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty loud. Thank you for listening to me tonight. I'm here to talk about two of the aspects, the partnerships for DEI and the reporting tool. I had an opportunity previously to meet with Randy Gutenberg and Tim Schell, talking about some of the concerns about partisan rhetoric in some of these partnerships. I appreciated their candor in it. Some of the rhetoric talks about disrupting and deconstructing the current education system, reinventing, reconstructing, or fundamentally changing that system. Using phrasing like from the National Equity Project, phrasing like reimagining and redesigning the system for equity, ongoing impacts of racism and white supremacy. New liberating systems must be designed with conscious intention and a shared vision for a desired future state. That's National Equity Project. Some other stuff talks about what white people must do to dismantle white supremacy. The rhetoric is concerning, and I really appreciate what the board did and listened intently to some comments about the Wisconsin Public Education Network, which the board voted not to associate with. I appreciated Randy and Tim's candor, acknowledging some of this rhetoric, acknowledging that they don't necessarily, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tim, and I hope you are able to address some of this stuff or touch on it from our meeting. But acknowledge that, you know, just because a partnership says certain things, the school district doesn't glom onto every certain thing in these partnerships. There's also some good discussion about when the partnerships will expire. Two of them expiring probably after the contract, one may be going on. Hopefully that can be touched on. And I just hope that we continue to look at partnerships that don't have this rhetoric leaning that can be divisive. There were some talk about some examples of other partnerships too. I don't like to just bring up issues or concerns. Sometimes there's good solutions out there too. Switching gears to the reporting tool, we also talked about the reporting tool in our meeting, which again, very candid, and I appreciated the conversation. I think it's really important in a reporting tool for anything like this, incidents, biases, prejudices, that there be very, very clear written policy about it. One of the things we talked about is having clear policy about what the reporting tool would not consider an incident. Things like that border on the aspects of freedom of speech, political speech. Kids do have some freedom of speech in school. They shouldn't, some kids shouldn't be able to report other kids for wearing a BLM shirt or a MAGA shirt. Those are things that kids also have a right to express. And those things should be protected. And I hope we can touch on some written policy about what things would not rise to that threshold that we talked about, having a threshold of what the reporting tool would be used for. Also, I think it's important that the due process in the reporting tool for both targeted people, victims, and people that are accused or aggressors. I think written due process is very important, and that might come up with some of the policies that we already have intact. And maybe there needs to be some updating about making sure that due process is achieved. Part of this reporting tool is the anonymous aspect. And of course, when we get anonymous information, it has to be independently corroborated so that it is fair for all parties. So due process is a very important issue. I think the reporting tool sounds like a great idea. We talked about there's really nothing to aggregate data about what's happening in our schools. And it sounds like, Tim, and you can correct me I'm sure later, that's something that this reporting tool can do. So I think that's a very beneficial aspect of this upcoming reporting tool. And then with the reporting tool, I think it would be really important to make sure that there's dispositions on the allegations or incidences that are brought up, whether those allegations in the end are sustained, unfounded, or exonerated. I think that's really important to know that when there's incidents that come up, what happens with them at the end. And I think on both sides, that some of what we as a community have said, we don't know where they go. And obviously not identifying information, but information that would be helpful for us to see a transparency with it. So those are my comments, and I really appreciate you listening, and thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Greg. And Rebecca, we didn't receive any comments, did we? I didn't get any emails, no. Did you?
No.
Okay. Well, then let's go on to the course proposal.
Okay, and Rebecca, if you could open that attachment. So you may remember last month, we had 3 new course proposals. At the time, I said there was one trailing one that was going to come in the orchestra. And the reason why it was trailing was it actually was put in the summer of 2020. So it was a year ahead, and then due to the pandemic, we just put a pause on the process. And as a result, it wasn't forgotten, but in a sense, it got put into the railway siding at the high school, and we noticed that we got it back out and on track a month ago, but not in time to do the prior steps in time for your last meeting. But it is here today. So the concept here is similar, and you may not be aware of it. So let me add some background here. As our high school has grown, and you know, when I came here a little over 20 years ago, the high school had just hit 800 students. We're at 1,350 today. We've expanded, you know, interest in band, chorus, orchestra has grown. And there are space limitations to those course spaces. And so what our performing programs have done is they've created different iterations of this to either suit student interests or student proficiency. And so our high school orchestra program is approaching this point where due to participation, it would be good to subdivide. You know, we could maybe put it off another year, but it is coming. And so what this would do is the new course would actually take on the name of an existing course, Philharmonic Orchestra, and then the current course would become Concert Orchestra. So we already have a Philharmonic Orchestra, but that name would transit to the new course, and it would allow us to subdivide. It would be intended for sophomore and above. I'm sure if we had an exceptionally talented 9th grade student, they could participate in Philharmonic. But the idea is you'd have the Philharmonic for the more experienced students and the concert orchestra for the less experienced students. This is our future sooner or later, and I think the question is timing. Again, we are trying very hard next year to be zero sum in staffing because we think the budget's tight. You kind of look at costs, that's a factor. I also know when this came to the full board at the start of the month, and I don't think as a board you've had a full discussion on it, but 1 or 2 of you or your colleagues around the table said, well, we're doing this budget review. We don't want to totally close the door to potentially freeing up funds, but I don't think we really had any decision on that. So, you know, as Randy and I look at this, it's needed. We really see this similar to the workshop and the digital music course, that we should definitely approve it so it has an approved status. And then put implementation be more of a resource dependent timeline, which we really, and you know, all of these courses would be good to add immediately, but you know, our administrative recommendation is put it off a year until we hope we've got a better budget situation. However, you know, certainly you're the board, and the budget allocations we're looking at here are fractional. They're not huge, but you can get yourself into trouble by approving a lot of little things that then add up to larger sums. So that's kind of how we look at it. And again, this is a similar trajectory to what we've seen in instrumental band and vocal music at the high school. Do either of you have any questions about this one?
I would agree with everything you commented on. Our kids have all been in symphony orchestra, and I think it's just a great program. It's, you know, you think of athletics going through, start at that fourth grade level and they come in, they don't know what the heck they're doing. They give them that music and it's, they're painful concerts, honestly. Then you get to that.
You say that with love, I know.
Just state the fact. But you get to that last one, it is, you get chills because it is just, it is incredible.
Yeah.
You know, listen to those concerts, so I think it's great. And again, it's due to the restrictions and budget. I think that makes sense. And as I kind of threw out at the last time when we were talking about it, the whole budget thing's new to me, but I don't understand. And I mean, it's just out of ignorance, like, is it ever a possibility to look at something else in our curriculum to say, hey, this is no longer dated and we could add something like this? I don't know if that ever takes place, but it's something to think about when you look at things like this, I would assume.
And really, it's and I can speak to it a little bit. You're gonna get a more complete answer if Randy or Steve were in the room. But something Steve would always say is, our budget's not small. It's well north of 40 million. The budget ultimately is about making choices. So if there's something we really want to do, we can usually find a way to do it. I think the challenge for us, like any organization, is when we make those difficult choices, to make sure we have all of the choices that need to be made on our radar at the same time. So we're considering everything in relation to each other, because there's very little we do that we don't do for a good reason. And if you look at almost anything in isolation, you can make a really good case for it. And so I think in the budget process is, if the question is, could we find money for this? The answer is yes. The question is, to your point, Ted, if we do this, what aren't we doing? You know, and that's really more, you know, Steve and Randy's province in terms of managing the budget process. But, you know, that's always a good question to ask, certainly.
Well, I like the idea that we're theoretically in favor of it. And the idea that we're going to put it on hold until we can have all the budget for the next time and see which strings we can put to make sure this gets in and something else is not lost. So I like the idea, and hopefully that that's helpful for you to know that you have our support for this course. And then when it's feasible to put it in after discussion of the budget, that's the time, I think. Should we bring this to the board and let's say that's a
Yes.
recommendation?
Yeah, similar to last.
Let them decide.
Yeah, and let me explain a little bit about why we say next year. So, you know, typically, and you both know this because you've been through the process before, you know, we bring that May draft of the budget in, and, you know, we do some testing of kind of some of the bigger pieces before May, but the May, even though our budget process doesn't really formally wind up into the fall, that May budgets are blueprint. But by the time we get to May, and Ted, you know this, you're still got kids in school, you know, we will open, we finalize our high school course book for the upcoming year next month in December. We open the student registration process in January. The student piece really closes by February, and then we're into schedule development. So to add something in May, because we've gone deeper into our budget process, we found the money, then we're really not in a position to go and reopen every kid's master schedule, because that has ripple effects across the whole schedule. But to that piece that Jack was talking about, I think, where it was, well, we've got some preliminary things where I think he had charged us to come back and talk about priorities. Could we make some tweaks at the margins then? That's probably the last time you could make a tweak for us to bring something like this forward ahead of 1 year from now. Does that kind of make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the timeline for it all.
Okay.
So would you like them to make a motion to recommend this to the full board?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend it to the full board.
And I will second it. We're in favor of it.
That's
So,
2-0.
okay.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure Mark would be too.
That's true, because
we
You
could,
could hold motion. until-
yeah, maybe we should wait.
Okay, we can,
Let's hold it till Mark comes.
I think we could do that. And I can get into the report cards and we'll connect back with Mark. when he gets
Sure, I
here in
think
5, 10
that's only fair.
So, state accountability report cards. So the state has an accountability system. School and district report cards are key to it. They were released publicly on the 16th. And so I guess what I'd start by saying is we've had report cards for almost a decade in Wisconsin, but we took a year off last year because these report cards are very dependent on state testing. And we had a year without state tests. And so really, had the state published report cards last fall, the information that would be driving those report cards would have been no different from the report cards that were issued in the fall of 2019. So that's why report cards didn't come out last year. We had spring testing this year, back in March, April, and May of 2021. So with new testing data, they could update report cards. DPI also went through a revision process based on feedback from stakeholders about the report card. So, if you want to have a better sense of what changed, that's where you would look at that fourth document that's in board book with it. That is what's new for the 2020, 2021 report cards. But I think what I would like to do is just dive into our district report card. I'll have a little more, just because it's been a busy week and because the public information came out on the 16th, I can speak verbally about kind of where we stand in the county and with our peers. When this comes to the full board in December, I'll actually have some slides that show us against our benchmarks and in Dane County.
Right.
So if you could, Rebecca, go to the 5th attachment, the RSS, that one. That's the district report card. And if you can expand that as much as we could. So if you're a connoisseur of report cards, you will have noticed that there is a change in the look. This is the new look. It's designed to be a little more visual. And so some of the things that are different this year is the look. DPI does put, and there's an exclamation point there, the data reflects a year that's disrupted by the pandemic. Be aware of that. The other thing that was a bit of work because they didn't give us a lot of time to do it, but I think was actually nice, is DPI did allow districts to put in that little bit at the top from the district. We have no hand in the report card itself, but in the new version, we are allowed to submit a very brief statement at the top. So we just kind of tried to highlight things from our mission statement or school vision documents. So if somebody was to look at a district or a school report card, it could give a little flavor of who we say we are. And so what you get on the first page is their demographic information. And then you get down into the priority areas. And so the first thing you need to know is all of these priority areas are on a 100-point scale. Higher is better. And if you could go up just a little bit, Rebecca, not all 4 priority areas are equally weighted. So the way it works is 2 of the priority areas are fixed at 25% where they are available. The on-track to graduation and the target group outcomes. The top of the pie, growth and achievement, vary for a district or a school based on your percentage of low-income students. The idea from the legislature several years ago was if you are a school or district with a lot of low-achieving students, we know typically student achievement tracks with the economic characteristics of the community. This is supposed to be about school performance. So the legislature felt, well, you could serve a very disadvantaged population, but you could be actually generating high student growth And if we only highlighted achievement in equal weight to growth on the report card, that might not be fair to schools that serve large numbers of disadvantaged students. So students, schools and districts with very few economically disadvantaged students, like our schools in our district, have a very low percentage of the report card coming from student growth. So it shows here, down here, it gets equal visibility, but it's only 6.6% of our total score, whereas achievement goes to 43.4%. If we were a higher poverty district, you would see the needle swing this way, and more would come from growth and less would come to achievement. And so if you look at the pie chart for each of our schools, because the demographics of our schools, while similar, are slightly different, the pie chart looks a little different. The other thing, I'll point another thing out, we look briefly at some of our elementary schools, but this is our picture. You can see our two highest areas are on track to graduation and achievement. This achievement's based on the state tests in English language arts and mathematics. On track is based on absenteeism, graduation, third grade ELA, English language arts, and eighth grade mathematics. You can see on all of these measures, we outperform the state. We outperform the state. Growth is based on a statistically sophisticated value added formula. So it takes different variables into consideration to kind of modify the growth. Think about it as kind of applying a bowling or a golf handicap to your growth score. And you can see how our growth compares to the state average. For the target group outcome, we're not compared to the state because this is a race against ourselves, if you want to think of it that way. The target group are our lowest 25% of students from the previous administration of state assessments, which for this report card generally goes back to 2019 because there were no tests in 2020. And so what this does is it looks at your lowest 25% of students. So every district has a lowest 25%. Now our lowest 25% is a little different than Middleton's, is a little different than Lodi's, but it's our lowest 25% of students. What was their achievement score on the way the state calculates achievement? What was their growth score? The way the state calculates growth. What was their absenteeism? What was their graduation? And this replaced a different type of priority area before. And the idea was that every district has the lowest 25% of students. And if we call attention to how that lowest quarter of students are doing on the report card, and that's a motivating factor for districts to guide what they work on, you're probably doing something that's going to be good for kids for long. So these are our areas. Rebecca, if you could swing ahead to the next page. This shows how our schools did. So we had 4 schools in the highest category of significantly exceeds expectations, and 2 in the exceeds expectations, none in the low categories. We keep going. This shows our range of scores, and overall this is pretty favorable. And if you keep going, the next page is going to break down the achievement. And one thing that's new with this year's version of the report cards is you will see the histogram for all the districts in the state. This is the same for schools. So you can see where our achievement score stands in relationship to all the other districts in the state. So you get a normative snapshot when you look to this page. And so you can then see our overall score for math and English language arts. To the extent that they can, they break down our achievement based on some of our demographics, and you can see what those are. And I do want to say one thing that is different on the report cards this year is in the past, if you had a non-tested student, and really, I was talking with some other school administrators earlier this week. This wasn't really highlighted in a lot of DPI's information. Historically, if you were non-tested, you were counted as non-proficient. Because of the high number of students that didn't test last year, we talked about that at our last meeting. They calculated without taking this is only based on the kids who tested. It's a departure from their past practice. I personally have mixed feelings about it because if you keep it up in the long run, potentially it gives you an incentive to not test certain students. So they're going to have to wean us off this, in my opinion. But that's how it was done. And so this, breaks it all down. And you can see that we have some groups that achieve at higher rates than others. These are the types of achievement gaps you hear us talk about frequently. These don't calculate towards our score. It's only how all of our kids do that calculate towards our achievement score. The demographic breakdown is just to be able to provide us with information about what that looks like. And if you go down a little more, Rebecca, we have the performance levels by year. Here they've taken out the non-tested kids. And you can kind of see the difference between 18, 19, and 2021, and you can see graphically the pandemic. Yeah, we talked about that last time. We go on to the next section. It talks about our participation rates, and you can see our overall participation rate and what our lowest participating group was, which was Black or African American students. And then if you go further down, you can see how our students numerically over the 3 years for these demographic areas broke down. And again, you can see the groups that were portrayed in that horizontal chart at the beginning. This information is represented numerically here. You go on, Rebecca. Growth is the second area. This is only 6.6% of our total report card score, but ultimately, student growth from year to year is an important part of why we are here. So it may not count a lot towards our score, but this information has a lot of significance. We are higher than the state average, but not as high as we are in the area of achievement. And then when you break it down here, I want to kind of explain what's going on here. So this is a multi-level equation that starts by looking at pre-test, post-test. So how did kids test the last time they had a test, which now for these kids is a 2-year gap since the spring of 2019. And where is the post-test, which was the spring 2021 assessment. And then you take that raw growth and they look at different demographic information, prior achievement, economic status, disability, a few other things, and they come up with an adjusted growth score. Again, similar to what you and I might have in golf or bowling. And then it takes a school or a district and it takes into consideration kind of how you did relative to the whole state. And if you're at the state average, you're a 3. If you are above the state average, you're above 3, and if you're below the state average, you're below 3. If you're at 4, so a number either way, a 4 or a 2 means you're 1 standard deviation away from the middle, which is exceptional. And so you can see for our different groups, this is kind of our differential growth. And you can see in general, we don't have a lot of variation, which in some respects is good. You can see that sometimes are not proficient last year students, that's a factor. And sometimes you'll see our students with disabilities. Maybe that's a number we want to look at, but this kind of shows a differential growth. I want to point some.
Is this a K-12 view?
So this is a K-12 view of who's tested.
Right, right.
So, this would mean for growth, this isn't going to show us anything this year, for the elementary kids. Because the fourth graders in 2021 were second graders in 2019. They didn't have a pretest. So really, this is grades 5 through 11 that calculate towards this, which is why the all students is 1707. So you take out the grades that aren't in the growth mix and you take out our non-participating kids, because you can't do pre or post if there's not a pre or post score. One thing I want to point out is that our lowest quarter of students is not necessarily the ones who weren't proficient last year, because the state has one level for proficiency, and the lowest quarter is just looking at our lowest quarter of kids. So please understand that this is not exactly the same as the target group, but there's a lot of overlap in who's in each of those groups. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next one, Rebecca. Target group outcome. Again, we can see that we're above the state average. Our target group score is higher than 78% of districts. So that's nice to see. You can see how our group does. So when you see this graph, if you can scroll up a little bit, Rebecca. What we're seeing here is it's going to share, this is how our lowest 25% of kids did versus our highest 75% of students as based on their 2019 tests. So you're seeing their achievement, you're seeing their value added growth, you're seeing their graduation rates, and you're seeing their absenteeism rates. And so on the one hand, I think we need to acknowledge that our target group kids on all of these measures are underperforming the non-target group, which perhaps for achievement is not shocking, because to move from the lowest 25% to be on par with the upper 75% in the space of a year or two would be a pretty significant move. But growth, that could be similar or better. You'd like to see on-track graduation rates, and you'd like to see on-track chronic absenteeism, because quite frankly, if the student is not in school, how do you make progress? Despite, and you can see there's differences, and we would like these differences to close. That having been said, if you go back up to the top, this is a better profile than 78% of districts in the state. So make of that what you will. We can go on to the next one, Rebecca. On track to graduation is chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, third grade ELA, and 8th grade math. And so again, you can see on all of these numbers, we outperform the state average. That's why we get a high score in this. And if we go down a little bit more, this breaks down our on-track information by different groups. And one thing I want to call attention to, and this is a little more lab, this goes back to 1920. I want to call attention to some pieces from our 1920 data. And so, first of all, I want to point out that our chronic absenteeism rate is much better than the state average. That's good. It's not the same across all groups. And in particular, I want to point out our economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. If you look across the 3-year period, they're the only groups that are broken out of this analysis that are in double digits. So making sure that more of those students are coming to school more consistently is something we have an opportunity to do better on, because these numbers are at least running around double of our district rate. The other thing I want to point out that I think we do have to kind of keep an eye on is that in 1920, our chronic absenteeism rate began, and we got to kind of see where we come in this year, but it's higher than it was the preceding 2 years. Is that a blip or a trend? That's something we're going to have to monitor. You can keep going, Rebecca. Student graduation rates. Now, this is based on a cohort. Cohorts are smaller. You've got to get to 20 of any group to show data on here. So that's why you have a lot less information showing, because in any one of our graduating classes, you tend not to get to these numbers. So we have breakouts for white students and students with disabilities that would typically be in this table. You can keep going, Rebecca.
Could you go back?
Yes.
That number for, on the breakout, doesn't seem right. If we've got 1,400. Well, we had 1,700 who tested,
Mhm.
and the white is only 279.
Yes. So these are graduation rates. If you think about our typical grad, so
Oh, the graduating class,
so
yeah,
the
yeah.
class that we could generate a
I'm
four-year
sorry.
rate for, 316, and the 7-year class was 295. That's why they're,
Sorry.
and actually, I'm glad we went back, because one thing you sometimes talk about with 4-year versus 7-year rates is some students with their IEPs have a longer runway for, post-secondary planning. They have extended programs. Tom Grunder works in that area for us. So you'll see that there's a jump between the 4-year rate for students with disabilities and the 7-year rate. And the 7-year rate really comes in line with our overall population. And the difference is that extended program. Keep going, Rebecca. Post-secondary preparation. None of this counts on the score. This is informational. But one thing with this new version of the report card, and this was based on statutory requirements that actually DPI, the governor and legislature put in place several years ago, but it takes time to build your data system to put it into the report card accurately. We now show advanced courses, which would be advanced placement, which we have, or international baccalaureate, which we don't have. Dual enrollment classes, so those would be some of our Madison College classes, concepts of entrepreneurship with Iowa, and our Madison College aligned courses. Industry recognized credentials, that's a program where students who are in a technical field can take a certification exam, an industry recognized certification exam, for instance, CNA exam, different kinds of information technology exams, and get a credential. And then work-based learning would be co-ops or youth apprenticeships. As you can see, our participation relative to the state at large, and you can see in all of these post-secondary programs, and this is really a high school measure, but you've got to build kids up there through the whole system. We have 50 to double, 50% to a doubling of participation vis-a-vis the whole state. And then if you go further down, and this is the topic you have been discussing lately, what does it look like for different groups? And you can see in advanced courses, for all students, if you go back, you have to kind of go back up. You can see for all students, it's in the mid to upper 30s for the courses, and then 2.9, 3.9. Keep that in mind when we come down here. So you can see that, for economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, in particular Latino students, on AP courses, you see lower participation. Not enough students to make self-size for Hawaiian Pacific Islander, EL, or Black students. For dual enrollment, again, not enough to make self-size here. We actually see less variation. So our dual enrollment courses actually have much more equitable participation than you'd see for AP. So these are the ones that have some kind of post-credit, secondary credit attached. So I think that's an interesting point, and there's some, real positives in there. And if you look at, where our participation is for all of our groups relative to the state, you can see regardless of the demographic, our participation rates are much higher than the state's. When you go to industry recognized credentials, these are very small numbers of students. We'll just put it in here, but again, you know, there are some things that you see, and you know, sometimes this flips the table. Sometimes you see greater participation in work-based learning experiences for economically disadvantaged students or students with disabilities than the population at large. The next page, and we're almost done here, for the district, is arts. And so we now report, like all districts, art design courses, dance courses, which we do not have, music courses, theater courses, which we do have, but we quote our theater courses in English, so they don't show up as theater here. We might consider this differently in the future, but for now, the theater courses show up in English. That's why you see a 0 for us here. And then very similar to what we saw in the advanced work table, you can see how our participation in art and design and music courses affect the state at large. And you can see the variation, and there are some variations. I think the one thing that really catches my attention in here is, and again, it's actually not bad, but you do see some variation across groups in music and art, although I will point out these variations are less than you would see at the state level. So it depends if you want to look at a glass half full, glass half empty. You'd like to remove anything that's kind of predicting variation and have it be simply a matter of student choice. But I will say when we look at the variation in these two areas, it's a lot tighter than you would see at the state level, particularly in music. And that is it for the district report card. I want to just hit if you could close this, Rebecca. And I just want to quickly go to the front page of all of our school report cards and then kind of open it up to questions. So start with Arboretum here. And so one thing you'll notice with Arboretum, and this is true for Heritage and Prairie, is that when we look at the priority area, so first of all, very high scores, you will notice a different looking pie chart. So for Arboretum, it's almost entirely driven. It's 2/3 achievement. It's a quarter on track, 7.5 growth. And you're going to say, well, where is the target group? So remember, the target group is the lowest 25% from the last time we tested kids. That was spring of 2019. Our elementary schools are ending at 4th grade. So our 4th graders in the spring of 2021 were 2nd graders in the spring of 2019. We don't test 2nd graders on state assessments. Next year, we will have target groups for all 3 of our elementary schools based on spring 2021 data, but for the first year of this, there's nothing there. But again, I mean, you can see Arboretum, high achievement, high growth. If you're looking carefully, you will notice that Arboretum pegs the needle on value added growth in mathematics. And if you just skip very quickly to growth, I can show you what that looks like on a growth table. So why do they peg the needle? The answer is when you look at the school, if you scroll down, if you look at the all students, Arboretum's at 5.1 for all students on their mathematics growth. Now, if you remember, what does a 4 represent?
Exceeding by the 1 standard deviation.
Absolutely right, Ted. So if it's by 5, this is 2 standard deviations. That's really remarkable. And you'll see for all of the groups Arboretum has, they're all above 5. This is really gold standard work. And with that, if you can X out and go to the next report card, But that's when you see a big number like that, that's what underlies it. So Heritage comes next. Again, very good score. And again, Heritage, if you look at their math growth, Heritage is 100 on math growth. They pegged the needle on the value added. We'll close them because it's going to look a lot like Arboretum. And then if we go to Prairie, I want to do all the elements. Excellent. Again, you're going to see, again, a very good number in the overall score. And again, Prairie pegged the needle on mathematics growth. So our 3 elementary schools all got the maximum score for mathematics growth, which is exceptional. And you'll notice they really also had outstanding growth scores in English language arts as well. So lots of, really impressive information here for the 3 elementaries. We go to intermediate. For intermediate, again, it's a very good number. Intermediate gets to their really high number following a little different pathway. So for intermediate, they got there, and I'm not sure this is, the DPI is completely right with the pie chart, but that's what they have. The key thing I'd like to highlight with intermediate, if you scroll down just a tidge, Rebecca, that 92 on the target group is very impressive. And actually, if you could track down a few pages to the target group detail for intermediate, I'll tell you when we get there. Here we go. These are really strong growth numbers, and I want to point out that for both English language arts and mathematics, intermediate schools, lowest 25% of the target group, showed actually higher growth than the non-target kids. That's what we would hope to see. I mean, we really try to focus on our struggling kids. We put more resources into it as a board. You've been very supportive of allocating more resources to academically struggling kids. And this is this is exactly what you would aspire to in every situation where the target group may not be at the same achievement level yet as a non-target group. I mean, that's not going to change overnight, but this is really what you want to see. And that's one reason why intermediate has such a positive report card score. So we can.
Why do you think for that particular school in general?
Well, I think that's a tough question. I don't know. A little bit. I'm going to see if there may be some wait time there, but I mean, I will say that it is. If you think about our 3 elementary, so the schedule is very similar between the 3 elementary schools and intermediate in that you've got an intervention, an IE period every day of the week. There are some advantages, I think, from having all of your kids in 2 grades in 1 school, because that entire grade level is in the school. And when you're kind of evaluating all of your students and trying to direct your resources, you're guiding that for a whole grade level at a time for the entire district. And there may be some efficiencies that come with that. Whereas our elementary schools are serving different zones because they're 5-grade buildings. Amy, I don't know.
We would just be speculating. I mean, we would have to keep monitoring this and see if this.
Yeah.
It could be any number of reasons.
It could just be this year. Good. Close that out. And we will go to middle school next. So, with middle school, you have high achievement and you have high on track. If you go down just a little bit, Rebecca, the target group outcomes and the growth outcomes do lag some here. There are a few things we can attribute that to. And this is something that Jeff and his team at the middle school are looking at. Historically, the growth has been a little lagging. compared to the rest of the state. A difference is our middle school really operates on more of a junior high model. So there are 8 periods of the day plus the advisory win time. We have a lot of electives. English and math get one, on average, 45-minute period a day. In a lot of middle schools in the state, the allocation of time for English language arts and mathematics is much higher, similar to what you might see at the intermediate school, where it's 85 minutes. So when you have a growth calculation, our middle school, which has less time in the day for mathematics and English, is being compared against peer institutions that have a different program model, but they serve the same range of ages, and they typically have more time for mathematics and English language arts. Now, what do our kids get in return? We have tech ed, FACE, ag, and business at the middle school, and there are almost no other middle schools in the state that would offer all 4. So we have more of a junior high model. A lot of the electives that are present at the high school get introduced to kids in our middle school, which is more of a junior high model. And so kids have had more exposure by the time they begin to make their 4-year decisions for high school. Our concept is our kids are already at a high level, and this helps them with their longer term academic and career planning. But our schedule does put our middle school in a bit of a disadvantage for things like growth. That having been said, can we explain that all by growth, not all of the lagging growth due to the schedule? And that's something we're looking at, because the answer is possibly not. And the target group outcomes is a little lower. And that's something we have to look at as well. The elementary schools, the intermediate school, and also the high school have more time for academic support built into the week than the middle school does. So the middle school has 2 win periods a week. The high school has a Monday homeroom, but then 4 contact times go into the week. And then the elementary and the intermediate school have IE every day of the week. So I think when we see something like the target group outcome, I know this is, again, the middle school schedule is something that Jeff has brought the question of the schedule kind of off the back burner and onto the front burner at the middle school. It's been a discussion that simmered off and on for easily a decade. Change can sometimes be tough, and I think that's one reason why it hasn't happened, but I think we really do need to look at the middle school schedule. I'm not saying it's the only thing going on here, but it's something we've talked about for a long time, and we probably need to, ask the middle school to bring.
How long have we had a middle school concept?
So we first set up a middle school in an independent building in 91 or 92. There was a middle school program prior, it was 6-8. And then in 1996, when we opened Prairie Elementary, we changed our grade configuration. Prior to Prairie opening in 1996, it's before my time, but I think I'm right. And I'm going to ask Mark to be my accountability partner here.
I'm waiting for what you say.
Is we had a K2 school, we had a 3-5 school, we had a 6-8 middle school, and then we've always had a 9-12 high school. When Prairie opened, we changed our grade configuration to what it is today. Prairie and Heritage became K4s. The intermediate school was created as a 5-6, and the middle school became a 7-8. And the 6th grade program nationally typically has fewer electives than a 7-8. And once we became a 7-8 middle school, there came to be more of a tug to think of it more in a junior high model than as your middle school model. And it was a change over years. And we still have aspects of a middle school model. So I mean, at the middle school, students are still on teams, Gators, Stars, Comets. And that's a very middle school kind of thing. But when you look at the course selection students have and the way the schedule is organized, it's very much a middle school model where it's almost kind of a mini high school with more electives than you would typically see in a middle school, more movement in the day, seeing more teachers in the day.
Go ahead.
Does the middle school, so this, the 7 and 8 are lumped together in these scores, right?
Yes.
There's probably a noticeable difference between the 7 and 8, I guess, based on comments that we got and the talking with the teachers in our sessions, getting together with them. It was commented on that the 7th grade, there's a noticeable difference in what this pandemic has, how it's impacted them. And yes, I'm part of it. 7th grade probably bypassed intermediate altogether for the most part.
Substantially. They didn't have a 6th grade and they lost the last quarter of their 5th grade.
Yeah. So, that's gonna be significant probably in that. And it's not unique to this community, I don't believe.
No, it's not. It's not. Middle school, I mean, you've all had kids. You know,
Middle school.
early adolescence is a big time in the developmental life of kids. And then to not have the school routine while all that's going on and then come back to a traditional school environment, everybody was disrupted, but I would argue nobody's been more disrupted than a 7th grader. So we'll see what this stuff looks like in another year. So we could close this and go to the high school, Rebecca. Okay, and then the high school, again, very good score. You can kind of see where things come from here. Growth is higher, and if you scroll down, Rebecca, the target group is also higher. So overall, again, the high school is being compared to high schools. So it's kind of an apples to apples comparison, whereas our middle school is not a true apples to apples comparison, but we think there's more to it than that going on. But I mean, overall, there's always room for improvement here. We'd like to kind of get this to a 5-star rating when, in the near future. But this is very solid. By the time we come back in December, we'll have had a chance to kind of see where our high school stands respective to other high schools and kind of put it more in context. And I think some of this, and it's true for all of this, and you mentioned it with the middle school, pandemic had an impact, but some of this is 3 years of trends too. So we have to acknowledge it's not all the pandemic. The pandemic's in the mix, and because it's a 3-year, trajectory, it'll be in the mix for a few more years, but there's pre-pandemic data in here too. So that's not a deep dive on the report card, but you still saw a lot. My suggestion would be, your thoughts on, is there anything you have by way of suggestion for what to bring into the December board meeting? And the other thing I would say, if you want to go deeper on the district or on any school, schedule a meeting. We'd be happy to talk with you, answer any of the questions if you've got a particular direction you want to go. I mean, I'm trying to forestall discussion here. We can, talk about this a lot more here, but this is a lot to digest. I know.
I think for the first portion that you showed on the actual scoring, limit yourself to that top portion, not go down into the details. There's a lot here. And did you start with this?
No, this is not what we started with. We had public comment.
Okay,
We went through the new course proposal,
okay.
and the motion was made, but we waited on the vote until you got here. So we're done with this. We're going to kind of vote on.
Okay, so this went about 40 minutes,
Yes.
and that's a big chunk to take to the board, I think. So if you could keep this to about 30, and you choose what you want to present or not, that would be my recommendation. I don't think the board necessarily needs some of the close look, more of a, you know, a big, let's see, call it the big view or overview.
Mhm.
I think would be helpful for the board.
I mean, I would think parents would sit there and say, we know there's a dip, we see there's a dip, what's gonna be done about it? That's, so to have all the time to go over the data, we see it's there, and we could probably address the ones that stand out like the middle school, but and I don't know that we totally have answers on, right?
Right.
And that's the difficult thing, but, you know, that's what I think they want to hear. Same thing, I think there's certain concerns with pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, were the tests apples to apples.
Mhm.
There's definitely allegations that that wasn't the case either. I can't confirm or deny that at all either, but, you know, that, I think you hear that from people as well, valid concerns.
Tests were comparable with the limited exception in the state test for English language arts in grades 3 through 8. There was one section of the test that was not administered in the spring of 2021 for the sake of time. And that, as I understand it, will be back in the spring of 22. So the math and the science on the board and the social studies comparable tests, there's that difference for English language arts in grades 3 through 8. Aspire was the same, ACT was the same, but there was a difference in 3 through 8. And I mean, part of the response, I mean, was more interventionists, which,
Right.
you know, but some of that I think we'll hear principals talk about also at the community forum here in a week and a half. Those are. But I can tell you, and you probably saw this in the paper, from a district perspective, we did have the highest district score in Dane County. And for the schools statewide, we tend to compare ourselves to, we weren't at the very top, but we were in the upper half. And I've got a sheet, I can pass around the sheet, but this will actually be a slide by the time we get together on this topic.
Will that and this information be presented at the engagement probably?
We might briefly touch on the report
Right.
card. I mean, in the context, I mean, you've seen the agenda that Randy discussed with you for the engagement meeting. We've got a lot to cover and we don't want to short the community on their opportunity. So we'll probably have just the district snapshot and a little bit of the comparison and some of the testing data, but we, you know,
Yeah, not
like you
just-
said, Mark, this
yeah.
is 40 minutes. We spent 40, you know, so we
Yeah.
got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, I get it.
But we probably will have the report cards available for the audience
Mhm.
at the meeting. Anything else on the report cards? I mean, in the end, it's a overall,
Okay, so-
it's positive.
It is. In the really end, I think, you know, Ted alluded to that before, is that what do the parents see in this, or do they, I mean, they don't really get an opportunity unless they're tuning in for what they've read in the paper. So is there a way to key points as a communication to them on our achievement record? I mean, that's the thing I've heard from parents too, is what are you doing about achievement? What is the achievement? And so we get this, but they really don't. And so if there were a way to synthesize this and just hit key points,
Mhm.
I think it'd be something they would like to see.
Yeah, so,
And I don't know how we do that.
well, so we do put the report cards available on the website.
Okay,
But we will be sending a communication home to parents that we still have to put the finishing touches on with
okay,
Annie, just letting them know the report cards are available. Here's how you find the report card for the district and your child's school. And we can add, part of that, we would hit the highlights, so to speak.
perfect.
So Mark, we talked about that orchestra proposal, but Judy and Ted felt, since we knew you were gonna be here shortly, we were wait on voting on it until you had a chance to join us.
Longer shortly than I thought.
It was all good.
Yep.
So did you have any questions about the orchestra proposal?
No.
So I think, Ted, you moved it and Judy seconded it to recommend it to the full board.
Just as
Okay.
we did the last one. So same
I'm in
criteria.
favor.
All in favor, good.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's keep rolling. Okay, the partnerships. So I didn't have the presentation ready. It will be in the December packet. But you do have something to bring up if you could, Rebecca. Thank you. Let's do the Google. Okay, and yeah, just go to presentation mode. So this is just an update. Again, I'm looking for feedback on this. I had emailed everybody about a week ago. I got some feedback on that, but certainly appreciate more. You could move to the next slide, Rebecca. And so kind of the focus for this year is first formulating a coordinated district plan in this area so people can actually have a point of reference to talk about what we intend to achieve. You know, we do have areas where we have opportunities to grow, and really our kids need us to grow, so there's some urgency. But I think something the last year has really highlighted in our meetings is people are very interested in this issue. There are different perspectives on this issue. And there probably are varying degrees of understanding about, you know, what our current reality is and what are some of the strategies. So while there's urgency, it's really important in our plan. You know, I think that community engagement session was good, but we really, I think, need within the community to make sure we've got really open dialogue. So there's a shared understanding of our current reality, where improvements are needed. We need to be responsive to questions. And we just really, we have to be careful not to oversaturate people, but we also need to be really sure that we're transparent and that we're open to all of our stakeholders, while recognizing we have some things that need to move. Plan should probably be a living document. And once we have a plan in place, I mean, you're getting something of an update here, but I think, you know, as a board, whether it's through the subcommittee or the whole board, that's really something for you as the governing board to decide. You're going to want to come up, I think, with some kind of reporting aspect, both for your role as a governing board and really for the benefit of the community. And so our focus this year, when we were first identified for disproportionality, we did a root cause analysis in the summer of 2019. It highlighted 4 areas. This is right off the plan we had to submit to DPI. Prioritize building stronger relationships with students. Prioritize building stronger relationships with families. Review and update instructional materials to ensure cultural relevance. And adopt and train staff on culturally responsive practices. And so these continue to be our focuses, and we'd see a lot of that in the plan, and then we would have to line up particular strategies to that. We go on to the next slide.
Kind of talking to those a little bit.
Yeah, let's back up, Rebecca.
Just a little bit concerning to me is when we're saying, all right, that's all good stuff, but I've seen advocates that are honestly looking at schools like that's what a school should be, it's building relationships. And they look at the education side of it as something that you can just get that off the internet.
Mhm.
That's pretty disturbing to me because the internet does not control, I mean, who's given the individual the coursework material, let's say. So to minimize that side of it, I'm not saying that's happening here, but when you look at that, I would be concerned to make sure that we can work on those things, but the actual coursework is of more importance to me, so.
Yeah.
But isn't this in response to our being disproportional? This is in response to an area that we were lacking as a district. We were found lacking, right?
Yes. But I would say that while that area of disproportionality was and continues to be only by the numbers for our Black or African-American students, when you look at that report card, you see things with students with disabilities. You see things with economically disadvantaged students, or English learners, our Latino students, not really with our families that identify as two or more, or our families who identify as Asian. But just because a disproportionality plan is specifically how we're trying to close that gap for Black students, I think that's kind of the canary in the coal mine south. I think what's true there is true for some of our other groups that show gaps. And so these, and actually, I would argue, if it's done properly,
Tim,
these benefit all kids.
where does the disproportionality report come from? The DPI?
So when you are found in disproportionality, you have to submit a plan,
Who found us at the DPI?
DPI.
Okay, is that the only group they focused on?
That's the only group that we hit the trigger point on.
Okay, but the other groups are looked at too.
No,
So like the Latino population, they weren't assessed for proportionality?
so they're in the report. They are close to the cutoff, but they are not at the cutoff.
Okay, so each of the levels actually were looked at for
Yes.
the disproportionality.
But the only group that's above the cutoff for the disproportionality
Sure.
finding is our Black or African. And there's it's what's called a risk ratio, and it's really as simple of what's your denominator of students in that group, what percent are identified for special education, and how does that compare to your general population? And if that risk ratio goes over a 2-to-1 ratio, the formula says you're disproportionate. I think our Latino number, our Hispanic numbers were around 1.8. Our numbers for Black students were in excess of 2. And realistically, anytime you see gaps in your general academic achievement, it in its own way contributes to who could end up getting identified for a specific learning disability or some other kind of disability. But yeah, I mean, we completely agree with your point, Ted, and I've got a resource to share with you later on here. Let's go ahead with that. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some of our partnerships, what they entail, and what is happening with each. So the Dane County Equity Project, that's actually, my mistake, it's the Dane County Equity Consortium. It's all of the school districts in Dane County and some outside of Dane County. Their monthly meetings. They have a few projects. One is Board of Education workshop sessions. I don't have the registration details, but the next one is coming up on January 13th, 6:30 to 8:30. As we get more information, I'm sure Randy will share that with you. They conduct an annual youth forum. That'll be coming up in April. There is a youth leadership team that helps plan that forum. Every member district sends 1 or 2 students to that. We have students that participate on that. And then there's a data project, and we're working this year to kind of like a report card for the 30 districts in the consortium. For the Ho Chunk Nation, we worked with a UW Nelson Center student on some resources that we're hoping to provide teachers with. Access permitting, because right now they're not entertaining visitors with the pandemic, but we've had conversations with the nation that would like to have some teachers go up to Black River Falls sometime in the spring or summer and have an orientation trip. And I know Jackson is hoping, if they can open up, to take the Exploring Wisconsin classes on a field trip to Black River Falls as well in the spring. For MSTAN, the Minority Student Achievement Network, I kind of want to break down what happens. They have one group that's called the Governing Board. That's the superintendents. Randy sits on the Governing Board. They have a Research Practitioners Council. That group actually met today. I had to kind of step out of that a little early to come in here. Tiffany and I participate in the Research Practitioners Council. They have a youth conference, which because of the pandemic, They didn't do this year, so they have a workshop series. They also have what's called an adaptive leadership seminar series that's for all of the leaders in the district, in the districts. So this can include principals, and this is a webinar, and it's this year it's with a consultant, Darnisa Monte Jackson. If you're interested, follow up with me. I can get you more information about her. There's a lot of resources from the network, from member districts. Every year, the network has kind of a priority topic. And then as resources are gathered on that priority topic, it's archived in the network resources. So even though we're a more recent arrival to MSAN, we can access work that's been done in the past. Because of the pandemic, we're still substantially functioning by Zoom, but we do have in-person meetings scheduled for the governing board and the RPC in Illinois in February. And I would like to invite you to put this on your calendars. The annual MSAN Institute is in Madison every year. Last year was virtual, but this year is in person. It'll be April 19th and 20th in Madison. Mark, you've been before. I think you found it valuable, but
Oh, yeah, it's, for me, it was a eye opener. What schools are doing, what kids are doing, and what they still want to see. So,
I mean, you could do a save the date on that, and we would be happy to support any board member who wanted to participate in that. We get a certain number of participants free now by being an MSAN member, and we have a much reduced rate for registration as a member district. And that would allow you, to get to know some of the other districts that are in MSAN. You could kind of evaluate for yourself. I mean, we're happy to share information to you, but there's nothing like going to the event of one of these associations. So you can kind of be better informed about kind of the, what really is some of the messaging and the themes of the organization.
I would argue the same for the equity project. I've been to a number of the sessions, and just hearing from other school districts what their issues are, what their problems are, again, it was very helpful building relationships that way.
And I think one of the real values is the networking and hearing how other people are approaching the issues. You're going to hear things and strategies that are going to resonate with you. You're going to hear things that are going to prompt questions, maybe questions down new avenues, maybe questions where your conclusion is interesting that they're doing that, not a fit for us. But I mean, I think that's a benefit of kind of getting into those situations. And again, I mean, the purpose of most of these partnerships is to provide capacity development and some training and networking for some of our staff. In some cases, these things come back to larger groups of our staff and teachers. And in limited times, there are selected groups of kids that may participate in some of the youth projects, but most of this is adult focused. And I think the youth forum is open to board members for DCEC, but I got to check on that. We could go on to the next. National Equity Project. So we have a district team that meets monthly. We are trying to, at the high school, and it's a work in progress because our kids are busy and they have lots of interests, but we are trying to engage students in this process for student voice twice a month. At times, the national network has all district meetings. In Wisconsin, Burlington, DeForest, and us are the three Wisconsin districts that are in our network. We've got districts from Michigan, Illinois, the West Coast, some others. So again, it's a national group. You'll hear a lot of stories in there. We have access to two consultants. One is based out of Oakland, although she has Wisconsin roots. The other one is in Dane County. Heidi Gill and Nichelle Nichols. Heidi and Nichelle wanted me to let you know that they have an open, and I'll extend this to the full board in December, an open invitation. They'd love to meet with you. And they could come into a committee meeting, but they would also love to meet with you as individual board members. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, when we ran out of time today. I'm going to give Rebecca the contact information for the consultants. And if you are interested in setting up an opportunity to meet with the consultants, we could schedule that for you. And you can, they want to hear from you, kind of want to hear what your questions are, your ideas are. And if you have questions about National Equity Project, they want to have a chance to be able to talk with you about that as well. This is something that they do for all of their districts. And so I told them I would today, and then at the December 13th meeting, extend that open invitation to you. So it'd be by Zoom because Heidi's on the West Coast, but they would love to meet with you. And typically it's a 30 to 60 minute conversation based on their experience with other boards and other districts. There also are community practice meetings. For example, if you are the superintendent, there's a community of practice meeting. If you supervise principals, there's different community of practice meetings. Those are strictly voluntary and a value add. The other thing that there is they have a survey tool for teachers called Elevate that we're going to start trying out with interested teachers. And of course, as with any survey, we're going to share some information with families so they're aware of what's happening and they can give some feedback on this. But I do have a quick handout on what Elevate is about. And again, this is not the National Equity Project's instrument. This is something from a consortium called PERTS, which is several university researchers. And it covers a lot of aspects of student connection in class, some social, some academic. And so this kind of describes what's in PERTS. And I don't want to I don't want you to think like we're going to be doing this in all of our classrooms right out of the chute. We've got to start by finding teachers who are interested in doing it, because the idea is I'm a teacher, I give it to my kids, it comes back, it's feedback on me as a teacher. Now, we might think that's the most natural thing in the world, but that can be kind of daunting sometimes to get that feedback. So we know we're not going to have all of our teachers wanting to jump into it. And then we've got to see, those that do will communicate it out to families, make sure they're comfortable with it. But really, when you look at this, from my perspective, these are things that I would imagine most families would be very comfortable for their son or daughter providing feedback to their teacher on. So again, this is something we have been introduced to by now.
And it looks like this is for all students, not just certain.
Oh, no, this is for all,
Right, so something that
students.
goes to everybody.
This, right, it would be for your entire class. So I would give, back in the day, you'd give this to all of your class. They would give you feedback on these measures. Now with this, then, and if you go down to the bottom, there are websites for PERTS and you can kind of see more. They have a toolkit. So as a teacher, if, let's say, teacher caring, let's say is my lowest scoring area with my class on PERTS, they have resources you can look at as a teacher, try this out. And then the concept is you try these out over a period of weeks, provide your students an opportunity to provide feedback on PERTS again, see if the measure moves. So it's not a one and done. It's a do this, see what the feedback is from the students on the instrument, look at the resource kit, make adjustments, and see what the student feedback is then.
So is there some pre-training before they begin or not?
There's an introduction, but not a lot of
Okay,
pre-training.
so it's based on the skill sets they have and their passion for this, and then based upon whether they are lower than they thought they would be, to have the support network in the
Yes.
toolbox.
Now, let's say we had 6 classrooms doing this. We would get summary level data, on the 6 class. So we need more than one teacher or 2 teachers doing it, because then the summary data that we would get isn't so summary. And quite frankly, if we just had 1 or 2 teachers doing it, I probably wouldn't want to do the summary data, because then the teachers know I'm really basically looking at them as
Yeah.
opposed to the whole data. And it would roll up to the study network that we're a part of. But again, that would be summary data. So if I'm giving it for my social studies class, I alone would see the results for my social studies class. It'd be aggregated data up above. But again, we would have to have a few teachers in the mix
Right,
for that aggregated data to really be worthy of being called aggregated data. So Nehemiah, our first series of the culturally responsive workshops finished up at the end of October. Our next step is that we are going to be participating in their Black History for a New Day course as a satellite course. It is a time commitment. You are busy people, but if you did want to participate in this, we would facilitate that. Would be happy to have you join us. You could learn along with the teachers, and we certainly, when it's done, could bring some of our teachers back to kind of share what it was all about in their estimation. But the concept here is just to build their background in African-American history, to make sure there's authentic and accurate representation of that in our American history and social studies. And by way of context, I mean, I double majored in history and political science in college. I got my master's in teaching social studies. I had to take content area courses as part of it. I never took an African-American history course at any point in that 5+ year period. Now, fortunately for my kids, when I was a high school teacher, I was teaching what in that area was called global studies. And that matched up actually very well with what my undergraduate and graduate preparation had been. But it's not a given that a social studies teacher, even if they majored in social studies education, have had exposure to this. And so it's possible that the teacher may not, have the background, to evaluate, to make well-informed choices. So that's the purpose of this. They used to offer this pre-pandemic solely on Monday nights. I would say by now a few thousand people in our area have gone through this course, but we just found it very challenging to get teachers to commit. I think it was like 10 Monday nights in a row, because our teachers have to maintain a work-life balance. Many of them are coaches, and the conflicts were significant. So what we're going to be doing with this is it is going to be sub-release. You need 2 hours at a time. So we're going to minimize the sub-impact by splitting our teachers into 3 groups and having our subs rotate through 3 sets of coverages in the day, so we can have our teachers participate without overburdening the subpool. So before the winter break, I have to complete our signups for this. They haven't opened it quite yet. They've told me they'll be getting this soon. So if you are interested, let me know. And what I would say for any community member, we're supporting our teachers in this. Board members have an official role. Nehemiah does offer this for the community, so certainly many people in the greater Madison area have taken this course over the years. I know we've had some people in Wanakee who have, and if somebody's interested, they can always reach out to Nehemiah and find out how to register themselves. There is some cost attached to it. And if we go along, climate.
Before you go on.
Yeah.
So do we have our entire staff trained in the workshop that Nehemiah presented earlier?
No,
Or-
that was about, good question, Mark. That was about 40-ish teachers,
Okay,
social studies.
Yep.
Elementary world language.
Yep.
And in general, when they didn't have other commitments during that time period, our instructional coaches.
thank you.
Climate, student climate and belonging, that's really our number one focus for this year's work. We had information on that leading into the pandemic. This was a major theme that you've heard from the community, including in that September community engagement session. Speak Up at Schools is, you've heard of before. I don't know that I've ever provided you as board members with information on what it is. So again, this is not homework. This is more the styrofoam box after the potluck. But I do have some Speak Up at Schools information for you, and I'll be putting PDFs in the packet, but I know if I put it strictly in PDF, you're going to be printing it out, and so I've already printed it out for you. And it's basically built around 4 strategies: interrupt, question, educate, and echo. So when you hear a bias remark, these are the strategies we want our teachers and other staff to feel comfortable in when they respond to a situation. So take a look at it. Once you've had a chance to look at it, let me know what your questions are. And again, reporting access, data review, some of the things that have come up before. We want to make sure we're not missing anything. We want to make sure that we have a good picture. So we just got done with 40 minutes on our report cards with academic data. You don't get typically, and I'm not saying you need 40 minutes on it, but other than like the exclusion, the seclusion and restraint report as a board, you really don't get any summary information on the behavioral climate in the schools, including bias incidents. And so I think in addition to implementing a reporting tool, we need to have a conversation that's right-sized, because as a board, you have a lot of things on your plate, a lot of information to take in, but both for your benefit as a governing board and really for the benefit of the community, because the community also gets a lot of information on our test scores, but they don't get a lot of information on summary behavioral data in the schools, provide a little bit of insight in that. So, you know, what that looks like, we obviously have to meticulously maintain confidentiality. So if the numbers are very small, we might have to redact reporting at a category if it could potentially be identifying. But to kind of share with the community that, you know, here's what we receive, here's a disposition when these reports come in. I think that's helpful in the interest of transparency and also, you know, awareness. You know, what really is the situation, and you know, what are we doing about it? Our efforts making things better, not having an impact, what have you. So the next one, curriculum. Here are some things that are in progress. So part of this is just kind of looking at our social studies curriculum and is there accurate representation? Is the history authentic? For the African American representation, that's the Nehemiah piece. For Act 31, that's some of our work with the Ho-Chunk Social Studies right now is looking at their vertical alignment of our Act 31 lessons and units. Amy and I are starting to work with our department here at system-wide on an instructional planning tool. It's kind of like a 1 or 2 pager that when teachers plan, they can just kind of check the lesson. Is there something that might create a problem? And it will provide some prompts to reflect. You know, in part, you kind of look at what happened in Sun Prairie a year ago and trying to provide a support for teachers to try to preempt that kind of thing from happening. And then, you know, when we have a chance to add resources and appropriate opportunities, we try to do that. Things we need to do in the future, you know, so we have things in progress to look at. Are we meeting the requirements of Act 31? We're looking at African American representation in our history courses. On the to-do list is, you know, checking to see where we are on the representation for, Hispanic Americans and Asian American Pacific Islanders in the curriculum. But that's in the future. Ken.
So we're gonna get, they're reviewing this and we're gonna get recommendations from the reviews, or how's that, the.
So we might, it would depend, if they felt like it would be great to add an elective class for junior seniors strictly on African-American history or something like that, then you'd see that as a new course proposal. If it's, we have a gap between the post-Civil War amendments and the civil rights movement, and there's a big gap in between, they might just make updates to their curriculum. Now, I think later on, I think we want to bring updates back to you as a board. We've done this work, what changes have been made, but some of them are just going to be changes the teachers make and report back to you on what they've done.
Yeah, so traditionally, updates in the curriculum don't get reviewed by us
Right.
as a committee. But given our need to know, and I say the public's need to know, I appreciate hearing that when it's done, we're going to get a sort of a summary review of what's changed in current courses. And if there's any, plan for new courses. And I guess I would, if it comes to the board, it'll get to the public, so.
Yeah, that's kind of the thinking, and I think, the first step would be, once our group comes to Black History for a new day, we'd probably ask Jackson, Gabriel, and some of the teachers to come in, what were their takeaways from it? What are some changes they're working on
Yep.
or will soon work on? I think, and they might come back later on even still, but I think you'd get an update then. That would be towards the end of the school year.
So this work is strictly the 9/12, right? Or is it?
No. So Black History for a New Day, we're going to have, we do a lot of American history at the intermediate school. So you're
Right.
going to have 5th and 6th grade teachers participating
Okay.
in that. So, and then the Whole Chuck Nation, that vertical review actually goes all the way down. And next. So professional development, Mark had asked for kind of a summary of some of our professional development.
Thank you.
These are the highlights. And so even before we remember, we started sending people to the MSAN Institute because there's a good institute. There is in Madison, no hotel, no travel, reasonable price. We started, and the price is now more reasonable because we are a member. I mean, we pay for the membership, but it provides discounts. Student or alumni panels, we began, really Larry Hale initiated these in January 2016. We've had Percy Brown in on 3 occasions.
Can you tell me what alumni panels are?
So this would be a situation where students or alumni would come in and talk with their teachers about what their experiences have been in our school system.
Oh, the audience is the teachers.
The audience is the teachers and it's the students. And these are typically mixed panels, but we make sure we have representation from different backgrounds. Amanda Goodenough at the time was employed by UW La Crosse. I think she's still there, but I'm not sure. She came in February 2020, right before the pandemic. And then in January 2020, the new Paul DeHill, who's with the UW Business School, and Leslie Petty, who's one of the deans. You'll know Leslie, she's in our community. She was on the advisory committee on a pro bono basis. They presented to our high school staff in January of 2020. Speak Up at Schools, I provided you some information on. And then we've done a variety of book studies, including Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. And this one I want to highlight because we anticipate doing more of this. And this does get to a point Ted raised, which is to really provide a good school experience to all of the kids means that the academics have to be strong. And so Zaretta Hammond, whose book this is, will say there's a lot of work that goes on that I think that she would say is appropriate equity work. But in the end, if it's not increasing the rigor and cognitive load on all of the kids, how much does it really matter? You know, so her point is culturally responsive teaching means finding ways to engage the kids, not really through, and again, she's saying some of these practices aren't bad, but simply acknowledging great mathematicians from different backgrounds. Her point is that's not necessarily going to help a kid learn math better. Maybe it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily going to have leverage. Her point would be, though, that depending on the student's background, some of which can be based on, and by background, I mean individual background. Some of it could be culturally mediated. Some of it, if you remember the Howard Gardner stuff on multiple intelligences, different people learn differently. Some of us are listeners, some are readers, some are storytellers. You know, she would say you need to know, I mean, there's a whole book, and I'm giving you the whole book because I don't want to do a disservice to her ideas. And I know there are people who, when they see culturally responsive teaching, they get an abbreviation, they think of something else, and they think there's something behind that term other than what's really behind it. So I'm giving you the book so you can evaluate the whole thing for yourself. And I will also say that this is Hammond's version of culturally responsive teaching. There are different versions out there, but we like hers because it's focused on academic achievement for kids. And her point would be, depending, there are going to be some kids who learn better through storytelling, if that's included, better through games, if you work games in. And so her concept is you've got to get to know your kids. And yeah, she'll say you do have to think about your relationships with kids because you can't really get to know a kid unless they're willing to open up to you. But then once they open up to you, you learn more about how they learn best. And then you probably want to adjust your teaching to recognize the different ways the kids in your class learn instead of teaching your preferred way as a teacher. And that's a hard thing to move on because teaching's hard, and it becomes harder when we try to meet our kids with their different approaches. But that's the only way you're going to reach some of them. So I'm sharing this with you so you can kind of read it. Let me know what you think. But I hate to take something that's big, reduce it to a slide, and then put you into the position of having to answer, well, one for yourself, but also to answer questions from people based on a slide that I gave you instead of the actual book.
Thank you.
And the thing I found, I'm going to read you it, but I read it several years back, is really something that applies to every student in your classroom, is getting to know what their background is. It took me, now she only came in at the second semester, but I'd assumed that it wasn't until nearly the end of the third quarter I found out she had a dad who was in prison and she was really angry about it, you know, and just yelling at the world. So those things affect how they learn, and you have to be able to know some of those things. They're just not a body coming in the room.
But that, again, takes time and, you know, speaking candidly, I warm up quickest and build bridges quickest with people that are the most like me and have some common experiences. I like people. I like to meet different people. But I will acknowledge somebody who doesn't share some of my experiences, it can sometimes take more work to build that bridge. Sure. And as a teacher, I felt that in the classroom, you know, and you're right. If you've got a kid who has something going on that I don't know about, you know they had something going on, but you wouldn't know what it was, and your finding the right opportunity to open that conversation is tricky. But you knew there was a lock with a key, and you just had to find out what that was. But, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So again, this went on a long time, even though it was 7 slides, but I also gave you, I won't give everybody at the big meeting a care packet, but through the curriculum committee, so I'm giving you a little more. How does that, do you think, land with the full board and giving them an update? Too much, too little, things missing?
You know, when you start combining it with the others. Oh, Ted, do you think just giving the printed handout of this so that we can look at it and see what's been there, or do you think Tim needs to go through all these things?
I don't think you need to go through all of those things. The printed handbook.
I mean, the thing I want to acknowledge, and, you know, I mean, Greg's still here. Greg mentioned in his public comments. So depending on the partnership, they work with a lot of districts. They often work nationally.
Yeah.
You will see different ideas there, some of which, you know, we might not feel are the right match for our local situation.
Sure.
And so I can certainly understand without kind of understanding, you know, our thinking in that it's a resource and we kind of evaluate what's a good fit and what's not a good fit. And I do think that's where it's important to bring more eyes into it, because, you know, even though I would always say, for example, that Randy and I have the best interests of the district, you know, in mind,
Right.
and we feel we have a good sense of what's a good fit for our district. We are 2 people, we're fallible. That's why we like getting board members to some of these events. That's why we try to involve more staff. And I do think there needs to be some acknowledgement to the community that how we view a partner.
Right.
And it doesn't mean we are adopting everything you might see or some of the people they bring in, lock, stock, and barrel. I don't know what's the best way to do
Just
that.
to the handout, the community doesn't see us, so I guess I would recommend build the PowerPoint, but try to synthesize again as best you can. Don't go in quite the detail with each group, but, you know, maybe 1 key point or 2 key points or something.
I mean, those asking those questions, does that address them? Probably not. You're
Not just
pointing
based
out-
on the slideshow, no.
No, because you're pointing out relationships, it still doesn't, okay, this group is pretty controversial. What in that, how can we be sure that the controversial stuff is something that isn't being dealt with?
Yeah.
And how do we know that all of the staff is acting the same, you know, the same way with that too? I think it's those things.
But I think that's the caveat we bring to the beginning of it, that these are organizations that we use portions of, and we use them through a lens of how it fits our district. And if that's at the top of the explanation, then you can say why we've chosen them to do some of these, because what perspective they bring, that we think is good. Because I don't think we can run away from every topic, because there's a portion of it that's controversial. Gotta rely on the academic rigor of what you bring to the curriculum to move forward. We can't explain every part of the curriculum to the whole community. They haven't been trained in that area, nor have we. So we're looking at professionals to come forward with and develop it, and also in response to what the district had said, we have disparities and we've got to fix those. And so I think it's interesting that we're required to fix some things in the district, and we need to know how to explain that to the community too.
Probably it's happened in the past, but never more so than now, it feels like me, right? Because right in it, you hear parents coming, my kid came home with this, what the heck? You know, I don't agree, and it's an assignment that, you know, uses, it's a divisive thing, right? And how can we ensure that that isn't happening? because it shouldn't be happening. And then I think it's. Those are really the things. I don't know if this addresses that at all. It points out the different projects that are associated with that may be the source of some of those. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, this is a whole other, I mean, it's a related topic, but it's really a topic worthy of its own discussion. Particularly as you get into the older grades, just because something is controversial doesn't mean it shouldn't be presented. In fact, if we don't prepare our students to handle controversial issues, we're not really fully preparing them for adult life. However, the question is, how do we work with families? And how do we make sure that it's properly structured and we aren't trying to sell kids on one concept or another?
Right. That's called propaganda. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
trying to do that. You're presenting both sides, and that's exactly it. It's up to them to decide. And you should be
Kind of.
steering one way or the other, of course. Yeah. That's the difference.
I'll try to slim down. Mark?
And the thing, whether it's this or even during national elections, I think the thing, somehow we have to get across to the staff, and I don't know how you monitor it, but it's supposed to be an educational thing where you're not promoting a specific ideology, you're teaching facts.
Mhm.
And I know when you get into the political part, there are nuances that are made, putting the other guy down or the other woman down because of their personal view. And those are things I think shouldn't be happening, whether it's that or whether it's, for this cultural responsiveness. And that's where I think occasionally we get criticism from the public because it's an indoctrination versus a teaching episode.
You were an English teacher, right? And it's amazing. I remember back at school, the English subjects, it wasn't anywhere, the topics that our kids came home with, these are a project that was so political oriented, every single one of them, or it was really, that's what was amazing me. And maybe I had that back then, just wasn't aware of it, but that was what the subject matter was. It's like, how did English class turn into this? That's what I felt like. What's going on? It seems a little strange. So that's my feedback as a parent. So,
Well,
Why did you guys jettison?
What's
sentence
that?
di- Why did you guys jettison sentence diagram? That was the first quarter of my 9th grade year was sentence diagram.
Weren't they awesome?
we do that. We did that.
Okay.
We don't do it
I love
anymore.
that too.
It was fun, though.
great.
But I mean, I think
But it
it's.
is, okay. Having taught, you try to bring in relevant topics that link into the theme of whatever you're reading.
Yeah.
Or the unit. Again, how he's structured, I think it's the same problem that happened with our neighbors is well-intentioned contemporary topics, but it kind of went off the edge because it had a personal slant to it. And that's the thing we have to continually guard ourselves against, from making it political versus dialogue about two different aspects.
My kids realize, because maybe I've shared this before, but the one teacher that my one kid has, a student, really likes this teacher, and and I said, well, does this person, can you tell how they are kind of student? She had no idea. And I said, well, that is awesome. It isn't being pushed one way or the other, and my child recognizes that, and I thought that's great. That's how it's supposed to be. So it's not always that way. So
Are we ready for 8?
sure. Got a spaghetti dinner at the high school. Football team.
You're right, you gotta get there,
Gotta
Dan.
get
What
there.
time is that?
At 5, I'm supposed to be helping Molly. So we're we're serving it, so I mean, we provide, I was at the Norfolk.
I got you, I got you.
It was all on her, so.
So this is, well, but it's a great thing, and by the way, state tomorrow, so good luck to the team. So this is the reporting form. This has been in development for a while. It's had lots of eyes on it. It's had feedback with kind of an operational eye from both the K-6 principals and the 712 principals. And I want to point out that this is an addition to how information comes in. I mean, staff will refer kids. You see an upset kid as an educator, you talk to them, you find out something happened. Concerned parents or community members contact you. Sometimes we see something on social media and it comes to us. Sometimes the police bring things to us. This is another way for us to gather information about something that's happening. It doesn't replace the others, but it creates, the key thing this does is it creates a way for an individual, when something happens, the advantages are potentially reporting it in the moment if there's not a staff person around, or for whatever reason they're uncomfortable, either due to the incident or due to their relationships with staff, to having, I mean, our goal when something, truly our goal when something happens, the best thing that can happen is for the affected individual to get in contact with a staff member. And then if there's any seriousness to it, get it to one of our principals. I mean, that, I want to be crystal clear. That's what we'd prefer to have happen, because if we have problems, we want to address them. And that's where staff and the principals come in. But recognizing if something happens after hours, or I'm not near an adult I feel comfortable with, this is a mechanism. So the concept here is the person, and we could have the link, we can have the QR code, but they would pick what school is involved. And based on what they select for what school is
Before you
involved,
get into part, you're calling this a survey?
it's on it. So it's a form, but this is on a survey tool. So I shouldn't call it a survey. I'm calling it a survey because it's in Qualtrics, and we use Qualtrics for surveys. You can use
So
Qualtrics.
it's an
for
online
forms.
reporting system.
It's an online reporting system. So you can click the link, you can put your camera up on a QR code, it'll come up. Depending on what school you pick, that will affect who gets notified of the report. So if somebody picks Prairie, Dean Kaminsky and Katie Schmuck would get an email that a report had been submitted. And then, because it's elementary, Amy would, and then probably Chris Mann would get one as well. And we would know there'd been an incident. And again, key thing is, this is not for emergencies. If emergencies happen, I mean, this is like when you call Walgreens for your subscription or the D, I mean, they're gonna say, call 911. This is something that you have heard a lot of comments about. This survey is anonymous unless you choose to add your name to it. It doesn't require you to put your name in. However, it does provide a place later on, you'll see, to put your name in. Some of these reporting forms don't do that. So then the next thing is, who's the target? Me, a student, a staff member. And the reason is, if I'm a high school kid, I might report it as me. But say something happens to a kindergartner, they're probably going to tell their parent. Now, I would strongly encourage a parent, if your child comes to you, contact your child's teacher, contact your child's principal. That is by far what we want to have happen. However, someone could fill this out on behalf of somebody else. And then, how were people targeted? Is this, physical act or conduct? Is it harassment? Is it electronic? Is it kind of a social exclusion thing? Now, some of these are not necessarily going to be offenses that would necessarily result in a consequence. Some of these might be more, well, we want to give some coaching to kids. It's gonna depend on the context. Then we ask, is it based on any of these federally identified protected classes? We ask for location, just because if there's a pattern in places where stuff is happening that points to maybe we need to have more supervision, it'd be good to know that. And how are you aware about it? Is it direct? Is it secondhand? We want a description. We want to know, have you already reported this? And if so, to whom? And then we would like the name, but it is optional. Some of this stuff happens electronically. So if you have a screenshot, if somebody sent you a bad Snapchat, and you have a screenshot off your cell phone, you actually have the ability in this to upload the file. Because again, if, Judy says, I sent her something unpleasant via social media, but then it goes away, there's a lack of evidence. But if I send Judy a rude Snapchat, and Judy on her phone gets a photo of my rude Snapchat, she can upload it to this, and then we have something that we can work with.
If only Judy knew how.
The kids know.
Yeah.
And then we have a little bit at the end, what happens, when it's received. And again, some of these things are not, we're going to follow our policy and procedures for discipline, but when appropriate, we will do something restorative. If somebody, is excluding somebody from their group, that's not going to lead, and if that's the limit of it, that behavior isn't really going to lead to a Saturday detention or anything like that. But could it lead to a coaching situation where we're talking about positive behaviors, including other students? It could lead to that. It's really nothing. This is a new way for information to come in. It doesn't really change anything that happens downstream. But I can understand, because it's new, I can understand all of the questions people have. So Ted and Mark, I see you both.
Well, I see, obviously, the anonymity thing is kind of an issue. That everyone can sit behind a computer screen or something, and when they're anonymous, they're not accountable in a lot of ways, so they could do anything. It'd be a great tool, and you can also see people abuse it potentially.
Mhm.
One thing. You see a lot of things, maybe you'll get a whole onslaught of things, and what you said, it's sort of a tool, and it'll be reviewed by such and such, so it's a really subjective thing. Is that gonna be clear enough for people? I could see it being a cause of like, you didn't handle this appropriately, and it'll, the public or the parents, whoever involved, it's like, now you have a whole additional conflict because you didn't deal with it. I think to Greg's point, maybe you gotta have clear things laid out as to what they're. I have one other thing. Go ahead, Mark.
So first of all, is this the new reporting thing that we've been talking
Yes.
about? Okay,
This is the thing.
and so does it need a vote for us to go to the full board as far as supporting it?
So in prior years, I would have said this would be entirely an administrative piece,
Yeah.
because we've never asked you to really weigh in on other pieces. But this is not the way things were. And I do think for transparency, and because there are questions about it, I think it would benefit from actually going through a formal board process.
Okay, so I we
That's one more thing.
move this to the full board.
Yeah. Well, and then Ted brought up some good points, and I do want to kind of share a little bit of the thinking there.
And just a couple
Yeah.
before you go on to that. So then, because you brought up, I think the last time, well, what happened before? And like, these are the handbooks for each of the schools that sort of address that. So it's like each one of them does it a little bit differently. So how does this integrate into that? Because if you go to there, it's, you have to write it out. So it's like, is this direct them to that? Is it, and then how is this delivered, or how is the deliverable? It's like you said, it's gonna be on the phone, the QR code, you can scan it and bring it up. And so I guess those were the things like.
Yeah, this is all electronic, and we would again, we would prefer this, the procedure in the handbook as much as possible. But, you know, if you called or somebody left a message and didn't give their name, we would follow up on that right now. We wouldn't say, oh, they didn't write it up the right way, so we're gonna, you know. Again, we want to address things, so the more information, the better. And I think, you know, the points you brought up are really valid, Ted. I mean, could this be abused? It could, and I'll be surprised if we don't have some, what you might call frivolous uses of it. And I think there's a certain amount of that we would have to recognize as the cost of doing business. But if it's over abused, could we potentially have to take out the anonymity feature down the road? If it gets to be a big problem, absolutely. You know, but let's see how it goes. We'll learn from that experience. You know, and I think it's absolutely true. There are going to be some questions about, well, it was put in there, and then what you do with it. And that, I think, does get back to needing to have some kind of transparent reporting at a high level about how we're handling complaints. And I guess I would say this is that, you know, and you've seen this happen recently. I mean, even today, you'll have people talk about things that might have happened in the past, and really the report wasn't made, and it's brought up. At least with this, we can say, well, there is a way to report this, even if it was done anonymously, because you'll I mean, the reality, and I think we've all been there. I mean, as adults, you hope adults don't behave in this manner. Sometimes they do, but as adults, we tend to be more strong-minded about it. But I mean, you can all think back to when you were teens. Sometimes there's social pressure when something comes up, real or perceived. This provides another avenue. So I mean, these are all the questions we should all be thinking about. And we can certainly make adjustments if we learn from the first few months of doing this that it's being abused or something's not working right.
The other piece is communication. Okay, so if I have to go through the high school website to find this thing, it may take me more time than I want to put in on it. The students need to know exactly where they can find this. The parents need to know where they can find it. And that might mean, you know, periodic reminders of this tool, but, you know, it can't be buried on page 88 of a website, and I exaggerate,
But not by much.
yeah, you know, it seems that we put in, but we don't take out.
Yeah.
And so somehow this is important enough that both the parents and the students need to know it. I think when you start looking at sixth grade, I don't know how much, you know, why it's there, but I don't know if the kids actually should be doing this, or it should be a parent thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can handle it. They may be, you know, that's fifth and fourth graders. I don't know about K3. And that might be some questions we get from the public.
Yeah, so Rebecca, I don't know if I could trouble you, and I know that you're on the clock here. Could you bring up maybe the McFarland website? I think so what a lot of places do is they put this on the front page of their website. And I would anticipate we would put QR codes at places in the building. I know smartphones are an issue, but we also know most of our kids have it. So if you look on here, let's scroll down. Okay. See something, say something, report it. So if you click on this, it will take you right to McFarland's version of this.
Okay.
And we're not going to do it because once you're in there, we don't want to concern the good people in McFarland. But you know, it's usually off the front page of your website. We could put QR codes up in our facilities. I think we start there. Now, I mean, down the road, I mean, we have an ability on students' Chromebooks to manage what they see. Could we push a reporting link on the kids' Chromebooks? We could. I don't know that we want to do that initially. I think we start by doing what other districts have done and see how it goes. I don't, you know, I think we need I don't want to necessarily go to the point of you open your Chromebook and there's a reporting.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that came up with the DEI report was these are good ideas, and then we're looking at it and say, what do we have that's meeting those needs? And we've done some things. And so we have reporting tools and we're trying to make it more available with this one.
Mhm.
So we're only adding things to it. So I think this is a good idea, but I think we have to make sure it's not the only way we're addressing discipline or issues.
This is,
No, it doesn't take the place of
no,
something.
you need a lot of different elements here. That's where the Speak Up in Schools comes in.
Yeah, yeah.
There are other pieces too, so.
Well,
I
it's just
appreciate
that
that.
people to go face to face if they
That's always
if they
best.
can, I mean, that's, so they would bypass this thing. And again, I think I spoke at the last meeting, that the big thing is that we have to have publicized messages at the schools about reporting incidents and somehow at the start of the school year and periodically through it, the students need to be reminded, the parents need to be reminded. It's just,
We're about to lose Ted.
No, I won't leave. I'm just, so let's go through the process. If I fill that out and I don't put in who I am, it went to this school, it's an incident. How am I following? How are you following up with the one who filed the report? And how do they know that they're getting something done?
So they may not.
Yeah.
So to get something done, you're gonna wanna have at a minimum some specific information in that description. And really, you're gonna wanna leave your name and contact information.
Right.
However, sometimes the theory behind this is you're gonna have some people who are just gonna wanna share an experience. And I think we're gonna have to kind of look back at this after 3 or 6 months and say, how's it working?
Yeah.
And if there are abuses or things that are really clunky, we're gonna have to come back and do a course adjustment.
Yeah, I think
But
that's important.
we're not the first, as you can see, we're not the first district doing this. And we'll find out.
Yeah.
Good emotion part.
yes. Then we move this to the full board,
Second,
all in favor?
right? Did we pull it out of you?
Us-
You're not sure?
No, I'm coming with more.
Yeah.
Conditions.
Uh-huh.
And I understand the questions. And again, if any of you want to talk one-on-one between now and December 13th, just let me know. Good luck with the spaghetti dinner. And good luck with the team tomorrow. Good day.
Is this
Yeah.
spaghetti with turkey?
No, sorry. Those meatballs aren't turkey.
Okay, I think we're good.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good discussion. Long meeting, but again, any questions on what you got here, reach out to me and I will